Reeve, principal of Vanderveer Elementary School.
And I'm Dr. Tian, superintendent of schools.
We are so excited to welcome everyone to our Vanderveer Evening Learning Academy.
You are all in for weeks and weeks of enjoyment.
You will be learning alongside your very own Vanderveer teachers.
Also, we have teachers and administrators from across the district that will be bringing you fun learning experiences.
You will become scientists, engineers, mathematicians, writers, world explorers, and learn to communicate in different languages as you explore concepts in math, reading, writing, science, social studies, world language, and so many more.
Thank you so much for joining us tonight, and we encourage you to visit often and view other lessons in our learning library as we add to the videos each week. Enjoy!
Hi, everyone. Welcome to Dialogue, Capitalization, and Punctuation. Oh, my. With your host, Mrs. McNanny here. I am a fourth grade teacher at Vanderveer Elementary, and I'm excited to share some exciting dialogue tips and tricks for you today to end a lesson with some comic book creations. So let's dive right in. So first, I want you to think about this picture. You may need to pause and go get a piece of paper or print out a copy of the picture from our reference guide. And I want you to think, what are these dogs saying? They look very silly and very cute. So I want you to think about what they're saying and write down 4 pieces of dialogue using what you already know. I'm going to set a timer for 3 minutes. Okay. So using that information, we are now going to move along with our lesson, but I want you to save that piece of paper. Do not put it anywhere. We're going to need it later. So what I came up with during that time was, my arms aren't long enough to reach my mouth, complained Wilson. Rover said, oh, quit your whining. Do you see how big my costume is? Why is everyone so grumpy? Asked Lassie. We're adorable. Do you think I can actually eat this burger? Wondered Duffy. So like I said, save this paper. We're going to come back to it. So what is dialogue exactly? It's a conversation between two characters. Punctuation may vary, but it must include quotation marks. Typically, each piece of dialogue includes something called a dialogue tag. And we're going to jump into this in a moment. So dialogue tags might be words such as suggested or replied, cheered, muttered. Think for a moment. What do you think a dialogue tag is? Let's find out. So it's used with dialogue to tell who is speaking. It's found at the beginning, the middle, or the end of a quote. Notice how when you read comic strips or books, the authors tend to use a variety of tags. The dialogue tags can be used to show how a character is speaking. Let's take a look at one of the books that the fourth graders are currently reading and fifth graders would have read last year. Charlotte's Web, page 7. Its name is Wilbur, she whispered to herself. She was still thinking about the pig when the teacher said, Fern, what is the capital of Pennsylvania? Wilbur, she replied Fern dreamily. Look at that quote for a moment. What are the different ways the author showed you who is speaking and how they are speaking? Okay, so you might have found that she was talking about, she said she whispered to herself. The teacher said in a pretty matter-of-fact way. And the last one I find particularly interesting because the author is saying here that Fern replied, but throws in an adverb, which if you watched my last video, you would have learned that an adverb is a describing word for a verb or another adjective. So it's not that she just replied, it's that she did it dreamily. So she's maybe kind of daydreaming, kind of got a glassy-eyed look on her face. You all may be familiar with something you've seen in a movie or someone you know who seems like they're kind of thinking about something else when they reply. So that gives us a little bit more of an insight as to how Fern said it. So, like I mentioned, dialogue tags can be found in 3 places. They can be found at the beginning of a quotation, in the middle of a quotation, or at the end of a quotation. What we're going to look at now is how do you punctuate those pieces of dialogue? So if the tag is used at the beginning, you need to put a comma right after the tag and place the quotation marks around what the speaker has said. Now, I've seen people do this before, and we need to be careful that we avoid this common mistake. The quotation marks only go around the words that are being said by the character, not the entire statement. The dialogue tag should not have quotation marks around it. Rover said, comma, quotation mark. Oh, quit your whining. Do you see how big my costume is? End quote. So notice that the tag right here, Rover said, is at the beginning, followed immediately by a comma. Then we have the part that Rover says. Oh, quit your whining. Do you see how big my costume is? End quotation mark. So they only go around the parts that Rover is saying. Now, what if the tag is put at the end of a quotation mark? We place a comma just before the second quotation mark, which would come right before the dialogue tag. We place the quotation marks again around what the speaker is saying. We do not include the dialogue tag inside the quotation marks. My arms aren't long enough to reach my mouth, comma, end quotation mark, complained Wilson. So again, the quotes are only around the part that Wilson is saying, not the dialogue tag. To separate or punctuate at the end of what he is saying, we put a comma there, and then we put a period here at the end of the entire statement. Now, the next one is a little bit tricky. Sometimes the author will choose to put a dialogue tag right in the middle of a quote to break it up, to make it a little bit more exciting to read. So you still need to follow the rules of putting quotation marks around only the part the speaker is saying. This means that you're going to end up having two separate sets of quotation marks in your dialogue. You place one comma just before the dialogue tag, so at the end of that first quote, and and then you put the second quotation mark. Now, sometimes that first part of what a character is saying might require a question mark or an exclamation point. You would use that in place of the comma there inside that first set of quotation marks. Then, when you have your dialogue tag, you need to place another comma directly after that tag, before the second part of your quote. "Why is everyone so grumpy?" asked Lassie. "We're adorable." So, if you look here, we have our quotation marks for the first part of the quote, right here, and again after the end of that statement. Why is everyone so grumpy? Now, that didn't require a comma. That one gets a question mark. Then we have our quotation marks here, followed by our dialogue tag, asked Lassie, immediately followed by a comma, and then our next set of quotation marks to round out the last part of what the character is saying. We're adorable. Now we're going to take a moment to try and apply what we just reviewed to edit our dialogue from our Do Now. If you need a reference of the rules that I just went over, you can take a look at our dialogue reference guide. There is a handy dandy chart there that reminds you of where to put the commas and where to put the quotation marks if the tag is at the beginning, if the tag is at the end, or if the tag goes in the middle. So I'm going to give you another 3 minutes now to go back and revisit what you've already written. Go ahead. Okay, let's come on back. So I hope you were able to take a look at your dialogue and think, is my punctuation correct? And did I use a variety of dialogue tags? You may have heard your teachers say before something along the lines of said is dead, or we need to put said to bed. So really trying to increase your choice of words in your dialogue tags enhances your writing, makes it more enjoyable to read, and really helps your readers create a picture in their minds. So in Charlotte's Web, the author chooses to use words like shrieked Fern. I can tell she's acting a little bit more frantically than just saying it kind of even tone, like even keeled. When she said reply dreamily, something like that really adds to the picture that you're creating in your mind as a reader. So, some basic rules for dialogue when you are writing a longer piece. It's really great to use some dialogue, but be careful not to overuse it. Sometimes, as a writer, we want to give a lot of the backstory. So, we give a lot of the kind of mundane parts of a conversation. That's not always a necessary piece as an author. Sometimes there's things that can be left out, and you can just leave in the juicier parts of what you're trying to say. So, too much dialogue may tire or bore your readers. Commas and periods go inside quotation marks. For example, waking up early, comma, said Evan, is not cool, period. Make sure also when we are having a dialogue tag in the middle that we use quotation marks a pair at the beginning for the first part of the quote and again for the second part of the quote. So altogether, that whole thing should have 4 quotation marks. Your punctuation there, commas, periods, exclamation points, question marks, need to go inside those quotation marks. We need to capitalize the first letter of spoken dialogue. So remember cups. The beginning of a sentence needs to be capitalized. Ethan said, comma, my view is awesome. So even though the quote starts after the dialogue tag, the quote itself needs to be capitalized. And use commas to separate dialogue and speaker. Let's go to the mall, comma, said Kira. So make sure you're paying attention to where those commas go. Again, check our reference guide here and think about how can you enhance your writing by using those different dialogue tags, by changing the placement of your dialogue tag to give a little bit more variety in the structure of your writing overall. Now for the you do part. You get to create using what you have learned about dialogue today, dialogue tags, and cups. You are going to create a comic strip. In your comic strip, I am challenging you to include at least 6 pieces of dialogue. So perhaps you're using the template that I provided for you in our reference guide. This has 4 boxes. So all together in those 4 boxes total, you need at least 6 pieces of dialogue. Feel free to make it longer if you want. You're an aspiring graphic novelist. Perhaps you can start thinking about your own new characters, or maybe you want to base it on someone in your own life. I'm also challenging you to use at least 3 new dialogue tags. Instead of saying, she said, he said, I said, let's throw in those exciting words. If somebody's mad about something, they mutter it under their breath. Or someone's shy or afraid of their answer, they whispered. Perhaps somebody is alarmed at something and they shriek or they scream. Maybe somebody is laughing as they speak and they're giggling as they say it. Try and think about how you could enhance it to really bring your story to life and give it a little bit more juice. So you can do one of the following options. You can draw your own comic strip on a blank piece of paper. You can go into the reference guide and print out this document there. You can set that as the background on a Google slide and do text boxes if you're savvy with that. Or you can use the website canva.com to begin with one of their templates. So on their website, you can go there and go to their comic book tab, their comic strips, and you can pick one of their pre-made or you can create your own. I encourage you to save your template or what you've created. You can create an account using signing in with Google, and you can save and download what you have created. I encourage you to bring it in, share it with your classroom teacher, share it with your family, your friends, and if you're drawing some of your own original artwork, maybe send a copy along to Mr. Derflinger for some art feedback. All right, I hope you guys have enjoyed this. I've had a lot of fun making this, and good luck. I can't wait to see your finished comic strips. Have a great night, everyone.